Hey folks, is freedom of speech being suppressed in the West? You see, I'm from Germany, and over here, for example, you are not allowed to deny the Holocaust. Holocaust denial, for example, is prohibited and punished in certain cases severely. But not only that, I mean, you have these anti-defamation laws even in the United Kingdom, where, for example, uh, if you criticize Islam in front of a Muslim, or you, for example, you say the truth about Muhammad, saying that he is a pedophile or was a pedophile, which he was, or you just point out some things that he did in the past in a Muslim's face in public, which is perfectly within the rights of freedom of speech in the United States, the United Kingdom, the people, the Muslims could use the law within the United Kingdom to sue you successfully, and you could end up paying a heavy fine and even end up in prison, depending on if you insist on it. So these are the kinds of laws because they fall under what is known as hate speech. Now, what is this? Hate speech is defined as a speech which can cause the person whom something offensive is said to become violent. So just to give you an example, if I say to a Muslim, hey, your so-called prophet was a piece of trash, he may get so upset and so angry, which the people, the quote-unquote experts in the Western world, okay, the big shots, they will claim that such a person will no longer have the control over himself other than to ram his fist into not only the speaker's face but also others, because he then associates what was being said with all Westerners. So in order to prevent this, people claim, some experts in the West claim that we have to ban. I know how this game works very well. Now we all know, and I hope that even the atheists, many of them who stand for freedom of speech, they will realize how dangerous of a thing this is, and how much this can spiral us right back into dictatorship. That's why I commend, for example, I don't agree with TJ, for example, on a lot of things, the amazing atheist, or Thunderfoot, or what have you. But when it comes to freedom of speech, at least to this day, I saw them defending that. Thunderfoot will cuss Muhammad. TJ even called Muhammad a scum F, the scum F Muhammad. That's how far he went on one of his videos only a couple of months ago. And I said, man, amazing. So he is one of the few atheists, alongside with Sam Harris, of course, and Bill Maher, who will speak the truth about Islam and say it openly and let no quote-unquote expert stand in their way. You see? So, and I also, in the future, I'm going to open a hangout, and I'm going to actually ask how many atheists are willing to mock Islam. Because I want to find out in the atheist community how many atheists have the courage to spit on Islam, to expose Muhammad for what a gangster he was, and things like that. But mainly in this hangout, I want to talk about free speech in general, and what people, if you're not in the United States, now I don't know too much how worse the situation, how bad the situation in the United States has gotten. This is what I want to find out. So I'm going to hand it over to Abraham, and I'm going to ask Abraham, do you live in the United States of America?
Yes, I do actually.
Okay, could you tell us, perhaps, how is the situation in the United States when it comes to free speech? Is there anything going in that direction, what I just mentioned in Europe?
In Europe?
What I just mentioned is going on in Europe, such as the anti-defamation laws, things like that, hate speech laws, stuff like that. Is anything like that being done in the United States?
Um, well, I would say a little bit of it is
Uh,
going on, particularly I would say mo for the most part in universities where oftentimes you'll be kicked off campus and banned if if you say something racist or it doesn't even have to necessarily be hate speech. So that's one area where I would say that freedom of speech really is at trouble.
Oh man.
But other than that, off the top of my head, I can't really think of any other places where that would be a problem.
Well, that's thank you for bringing that up. I mean, that is something. Did you Scott, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that the biggest problem with freedom of speech in the United States is that there's this problem where everything you're expected to say has to be extremely politically correct. Like everyone gets super butthurt about being offended by anything mildly controversial, and I think that's a problem.
Wow. And they actually law to ban other people's free speech?
No, it's not a legal thing. It's more of a social thing.
Oh, it's social because I really want to get into the legal aspects of things when they try to use the law to sue other people for the defamation or for hate speech or for any kind of things that go in that direction. Have you noticed that any in the United States?
Nothing that I can think of that off the top of my head, that I think is objectionable.
Okay. Go ahead, Faithful. What do you say, brother, on what was said so far?
Yeah, I'd say that. I mean, it really depends. I mean, it really depends if we're talking about a liberal state, right wing, things like that. I mean, but for the most part, I think that I don't think it's well. I mean, it's kind of hard to say. It seems like we're losing freedom of speech more and more, and I am a defender of it. I feel that everybody should be given a chance to say what they had to say. Now, I don't think everybody is saying, the right thing all the time, and I don't agree with everybody who says what they
Right.
say. But I definitely feel that people should be given the freedom to say things that they need to say when they need to say it. Obviously, there are certain things. I mean, it's an iffy topic, man. I mean, because as I'm thinking about this, um, I mean, I don't know. It's a that this is kind of like a tough one. For example, if I see, like, I don't agree with the atheist agenda, but I definitely feel that the atheists should be given the right to, express their, their feelings and what they feel, and but at the same time, I think that there's also a thin line between what is acceptable and what is kind of crossing the line a little bit. Like, for example, if a guy's coming out saying that he wants to rape children and he has all the intentions in the world of wanting to rape kids, then that's definitely that. Yeah, I mean, that needs to be stopped. Someone like that needs to be stopped.
Well, yeah, I understand what you're
Um,
saying. I mean, if a person kind of if it gets to promoting violence, you see, that's yeah, but that's even what I would understand. If
right.
somebody is actively planning, though, I would add that we have to, because sometimes people get angry and they say, "Hey, man, I'm gonna beat you up." So we still have to kind of see through the context whether he's actively planning to do that or whether it was just said in anger. But when that all is put in its context and he's actually actively planning to do so, well, then yeah, of course. I mean, legal action needs to be taken at that moment. And that would be the only exception.
Right. And I mean, but again, as far as for example, if we're talking about two people having a discussion, for example, let's say an atheist and a Christian, and obviously you're going to have two contrasting viewpoints. I think both sides should be given the right to say what they need to say. Obviously, now if this person is going to attack the other side and violence is going to be involved, then yeah, it should definitely be put to a stop. But if there's two people having a cordial discussion, a peaceful discussion, um, and they just want to voice their opinions, then so be it. You know, both sides should have the right to say what they got to say.
Of course, and remember, there's a difference between freedom of speech in, or let's say somebody opens a room on Paltalk or Google Hangout or what have you, any chat program. That is their private room. But in public, anybody should be allowed to say whatever they want, no matter how offensive it is to somebody. So let's say somebody wanted to put down Muhammad. If a Muslim can't stand it, tough, too bad. Jesus Christ is being insulted. To me, that is the biggest insult ever. That's infinite times more ugly and disgusting than if somebody were to insult my mom.
Right.
I still have to take it legally. And things like this. It does not matter how much a person feels insulted. You cannot then use the law to try to prevent or sue that person. That's the basic point. Now, if somebody wants to say, "Hey, if you with this kind of attitude, I won't allow you in my own home," fine, no problem. It's a private property. Also, if you say, "Well, if with that kind of attitude, I won't allow you in my chat room," fine, it's your private chat room. But at the same time, anybody should be allowed to say in their chat room what they want to say. For example, if I want to say something against Obama, Muhammad, Buddha, the Roman Catholic Church, what have you, I should be able to do so without any legal repercussion.
Right, and I would even go as far as saying that as long as it's not harassment or something that hurts the either one of the parties, then you should say whatever you want. Like obviously, I'm against, for example, racist remarks or blatant, homophobia, where to the point where the person is like, they feel discriminated. However, I wouldn't go as far as saying that they shouldn't be allowed to say that.
Yeah,
I think
exactly. That's my point.
I think that a good place to draw the line would be when someone is inciting illegal activity.
Yes, yeah.
Which means the incitement to physical violence. That's the only exception.
Yeah, that would include that.
Yeah, I don't see anything else. I mean, some people would say, "Oh, my business." That's another thing that I don't like. For example, people say, and I think that's even in the United States, unfortunately, "Oh, if he were to say this against me, then people are more unlikely to come and buy from my store. So that's why he's harming my business, and that's why he shouldn't be able to say that." I think that law is bogus too.
Well, that's not necessarily a law as a repercussion. For example, in Indiana, there's a pizza business, I think it was, and they made some homophobic remarks, and they had this huge backlash. Now, the backlash itself wasn't what was harmful. It was eventually it got to the point where people were making death threats against the store, and it's all good and fun when there's backlash. There's no harm being done, but I think the line was drawn when they started sending death threats.
Exactly, but then the people who made those death threats and nobody else should be made responsible. Only those people who specifically made the death threats, they are the ones to be responsible, and they are to be held
Right, exactly.
consciously responsible.
Yeah.
I think that libel should definitely remain illegal.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, define liability.
Libel is basically when you make up false statements about a person or entity
You
in
mean
order
like a
to
blood
discredit them.
libel, like the ones that they did against the Jews, and right.
It's basically slander,
Yeah.
except that it hurts
Right.
whatever entity it is.
Yeah, but here, okay, I agree in a sense, but we have to be very carefully on how we define it, because this is also used by the elitists to try to prevent freedom of speech. Because obviously, for example, if I put it this way, if you accuse somebody of a legally recognized crime, for example, let's say I call somebody a murderer who is alive, and he could face legal repercussions because of that, because I now made that statement, and now they want to investigate him, because murder, of course, is a serious thing. Then yes. But if I just say he slept with a prostitute, and that wasn't the truth, let's say it wasn't even the truth, but it had some moral repercussions for him, I would say no, it's dangerous then to get the law involved just because I made that statement. Because then, the elitists can just get together, and because we will not have enough evidence at any given moment, but then we cannot say anything against them, and they will most likely get away with their crimes much more easily than they
Well-
otherwise would. So it's
well,
not
I
a good
mean-
idea.
Well, I mean, it becomes a problem. For example, Amanda Knox finally, after like 7 years, all charges against her were dropped, and they had to. I think she had her trials in Italy, if I remember correctly, somewhere around there. She was put on trial for the same crime, which she eventually was acquitted of, and the charges didn't stick. She was tried multiple times, and in Italy there isn't a law against well, I forgot what it's called. Basically, there isn't a law against being tried for the same crime, whereas in the United States there is. But the harm is when you're accused of murdering your bedmate or the person staying with you, and it just causes these emotional repercussions, these social repercussions. Everyone thinks you're a murderer, and it just completely destroys these social
Well,
relationships
yeah,
that
that's
you
why I
have.
mentioned. Yeah, that's why I mentioned if it's a legally recognized crime like murder, yeah, then I would agree. If you accuse somebody of being a murderer who is not, you don't have the legally recognized evidence to back it up, then I would agree. Okay, then I would agree that that could also be included under being you could say that that shouldn't be allowed. I will
Right,
go
yeah.
I will give that much. But if it's not something that is legally recognized as a crime, for example, something like prostitution, let's say prostitution is legal, and you call somebody a woman a prostitute, then that should not be an issue.
Right, yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely. Like I think in Canada it is Canada they allow prostitution. It's not a problem, but
Isn't a problem here either in Germany.
right, yeah. I mean they in certain countries and even I think one state in the United States they allow prostitution. It's not that much of a problem. I think that's Las Vegas, by the way. I might be wrong on that. But to accuse someone of that isn't as big a deal, obviously, with what you were saying. It isn't as big as a deal as if you had accused someone of murder. So obviously the repercussions aren't going to be that great. So I would say that in most cases the harm done wouldn't be sufficient to for legal action.
Right. And that will go for all legally. Like I said, I mean, if there's a legal thing and you accuse somebody of something that is illegal and he hasn't done that, yeah, I can understand that. And that would be, like I said, that would be the only exception. Otherwise, so we have to be very careful. But the thing is that people, especially like I mentioned in Europe earlier, they want to keep extending and extending these laws. For example, they always start off, and this is where it gets really deceptive. They give you the impression, like the United Kingdom, they will boast themselves, oh, we have a tradition of freedom of speech, and we would like to keep that. But then there is, oh, you can't say X, you can't say this, you can't say that. Oh, there you insulted me, you insulted the just figure, oh, this and that. You know, it's ridiculous.
Right, and in the UK, I think particularly in England, if I remember right, it's actually illegal to protest outside of Parliament. So that's one area where I would say that's definitely stifling freedom of speech because I mean you should have the right to protest anywhere that's on public
Right, or
land.
your own property, or your own private public, your own private internet space.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a complete disaster if that is the case. So I mean, look at where and the funny thing is that I mean, if as far as I have seen, the United Kingdom has so far taken away the rights of freedom of speech by still saying that officially they have it. That the United States, I'm still surprised why the United States is still allied with the United Kingdom.
Well, I
Sometimes,
mean,
I kind of get that.
right, yeah. I mean, the United States, this kind of ties into other issues, but the United States has kind of a political agenda, obviously, when it comes
Yeah.
to their allies. I mean, for example, Saudi Arabia is one of the U.S. allies,
Oh
and
yeah.
obviously they've been known to actually host these Islamic jihadists on state television, state-funded television. So that would be definitely some hypocrisy in that area. So I wouldn't say that the U.S. is exactly, this this high standard when it comes to our allies.
Right, but would you not say that the United Kingdom is a far bigger ally of the United States than Saudi Arabia? I mean, like big time. These are the one and two, like almost like brothers and sisters.
Oh yeah,
aren't they?
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and in the UK, I think also in 2014 the UK also passed a law where you could be jailed for up to 2 years for internet trolling. And I don't know if they repealed it, but it might still be in effect. But that's also something that had a lot of backlash, public backlash.
That's something. Now, which country in Europe do you think is the one that allows for most freedom of speech that comes close to what the United States has?
Um, I'm actually not really sure.
France, maybe?
Um, Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe the United States should consider making them their biggest ally instead of the United Kingdom. They should put them on the top list.
Well, I mean, like I said earlier, U.S. has a really strong political agenda, especially when it comes to oil, for example. Like Saudi Arabia, pretty much the only reason we're allied with them is because they're our oil sugar daddy.
Yeah, I understand. But is that on the highest list of allies, though, or is that kind of like on the maybe place 20 or place 30 on the list of allies?
It's kind of like I'm not really sure. I mean, obviously Saudi Arabia isn't this huge power, but they do give us a lot of oil, so in that aspect, they're important somewhat.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. I've also heard that, I don't know to what extent that is true, but that the Saudi royal family, at least in the Muslim world, that's why the Muslim world outside of Saudi Arabia doesn't really like Saudi Arabia all that much, because for one, in Islam, kingship is really not allowed. Muhammad said that after me there will be only caliphs, not kings. So the majority of scholars, as far as I know, in the Islamic world maintain that there is to be no more kings after Muhammad. The kingship has come to an end. So what they then say is that the only possibility that Saudi Arabia even has a king is because the United States corrupted them and installed a king there.
Well, I mean, definitely it's possible. I wouldn't know much about that, but the United States has been known to install dictatorships where previously it was more of
Yeah,
a
I would agree with that.
socialist republic. So, for example, in Cuba, that was a big one where this U.S.-backed dictator caused thousands of deaths in Cuba.
Oh, that I don't know. I just know that in the Islamic countries, the United Kingdom and the United States used to install dictators. And in that case, I have to say, in the Muslim world, it's better to have a dictator because women and people in general have more rights under the dictator than they would have under a democracy. If you give Muslims democracy, what will happen is that the men will just use that one time to suppress the women once again.
Oh yeah, definitely. And democracy only works up to a point. It's if you're going for a pure democracy, it becomes a problem, especially when you have an entire society that has these kind of some would say backwards ideas. Because obviously they would hold the majority vote in that case. And in taking that into consideration, I would say that some of these Middle Eastern countries wouldn't even want a democracy.
Of course not.
But even if they did get one, right? Yeah, even if they did get a democracy, it would pretty much stay the same unless, of course, they had some kind of constitution which limits the laws that they could impose, such as in the United States.
Yeah. It pretty much self-destructs. If you give democracy to a Muslim nation, it self-destructs almost immediately, because they'll use democracy to destroy a democracy, because Islam does not allow for democracy. Islam has to be, I won't even call it a theocracy, because it's actually an Allahocracy. That's the only thing that they have. It's actually Allah Muhammadocracy, not just Allahocracy even. It's Allah and Muhammadocracy. That's what Islam really is. So Muslims, they like to deceive. They like to say this is God, because this is actually blasphemous. I won't even say that they have a theocracy, because theocracy was like in the Old Testament, where the true God, whom I believe is the true God, the God of the Bible, he had the rule. Here we have a fake Allah and his gangster Muhammad having his so-called laws, which are perversions of the laws in the Bible, and many added from other pagans and stuff like that I mentioned in many of my earlier hangouts. So with Islam, it's really a disaster.
Oh yeah. So I think we've kind of talked for a while. Would anyone else like to chime in?
Yeah, Sabala, have you got to say anything on this subject, sis?
I don't know what's the topic.
The topic
We're
is
in the side chat talking about something else.
is freedom of speech being suppressed in the West? That's the topic.
Sometimes, and then sometimes it's not being suppressed enough. Like with the libel stuff. They need to be a little bit more careful about that stuff.
Yeah, I think
yeah.
somebody mentioned earlier that legally it's not being suppressed, but socially it is, I would say.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of strongly suggested that, or kind of taboo, actually, that you don't say this. That. I mean, even as a black man.
Yeah, you gotta do the whole politically correct thing. Socially accepted.
I don't mind people calling me. Let's look at the racial vocabulary, for instance. You know, I don't mind personally being called a black man. I don't like that we are now called, and this is just me speaking personally. I know other people may disagree, but I don't really care to be called an African American. To me, maybe I'm just lazy, but to me it's just too many syllables. I don't think we have to say all that stuff. Just say black man. I don't mind being called a black man. But I understand why people would say it in certain occasions. African American. I guess it's fine depending on the context. But again, I mean, it just seems like when growing up, and I've always been taught to love people of all colors and stuff like
Dude,
that.
unless they're actually from Africa, they should not say that African American stuff. It's stupid.
Right, because they're white. South Africans are white, so if they come here, they're African Americans too, technically.
Right. Yeah.
but anyway, I've always had those weird encounters, those weird moments when I'm around my non-black friends, where they seem to be afraid to say the word black or African American.
Now, real quick.
Hold on.
Well, because I actually want to add something to what you were saying. Now, do you feel that? I mean, because this is where freedom of speech kind of gets tricky. Because the more I think, trying to hint at when I say that, there's a certain word that should never be said. I honestly think should never, ever, ever be said, especially by white people.
What I want to say is, because there's been this taboo, is I think primarily starting from the 70s and on till today, that white people seem to be walking on eggshells around certain people, particularly blacks in this case. When they can't say certain things like, I've even seen cases where a white person's like, well, yeah, I got a friend and he's he's black, and he lives next door. So it's almost as if they're afraid to say the word black. They're afraid to say the word African American because they're afraid of, how some black people are gonna raise the hold on. They're gonna raise the race card and say, "What you mean, you people black? What do you mean African American? What you try to say?" So it's not so much a legal issue. It is definitely a social issue, at least here in the United States.
Yeah, I understand. As long as it remains, do you see, this is my point. As long as it remains, you can make anything socially unacceptable. For example, I would consider it completely socially unacceptable to say Jesus is anything but God. If you lower Christ from anything that God, that is socially unacceptable to me, to be very honest with you. And that is much more of a disaster. You see, the N-word is like infinitely small compared to calling Jesus Christ even the smallest name. And this is what we have to implant into the Christians once again, because this is what they forget. Oh, so now all of a sudden the black man is above Jesus Christ now? Now Jesus Christ's honor is not much worth anymore, but these racial issues are of more concern. See, this is what I have a problem with. This is what makes me angry. If you want to make something socially acceptable, start with calling Christ names. Say that is socially unacceptable. Socially shun those people first before you do any who uses any racial slur. That's what I would say.
I think the
This
main
is why
problem.
freedom of speech is a tricky thing, you know. But I definitely see. I mean, uh, I mean, this is a tough one, man. You know, because like, you know, a part of me wants to let people have the right to say what they want to say, but then when I think about what a lot of people actually have deep down inside in their hearts, and then we got to talk about, well, does that mean we let the KKK make their rallies and say the nasty things they say, and then use racial slurs that were
Right.
used against black people, and or call Hispanic people, the words that they refer to us as, and insult people, with racial slurs, that kind of thing. That's when I start thinking, you know, I don't know.
The
It's
only
it's a
way you
tricky
can
thing,
draw the
man.
line there, yeah, it is. But the thing is, I'll make it easy for you. What you can do is, as soon as the KKK members, the moment they promote physical violence against any of these groups, then you can start making it a legal issue. Otherwise,
Right.
you just have to take it, even if it is the KKK. As hard as that may sound, but that's how it is under freedom of speech.
Right, yeah. Freedom of speech doesn't just mean free for some individuals. It should be for everyone who's a citizen of the country enforcing that. I mean, unless and then we get into a different problem where some people would say, "Oh, maybe we should restrict these people because they've been known to repeatedly, harass people and cause riots or whatever." But then even then, it depends because obviously these could possibly be protesters even, and then in that case, if the state could use that law to silence them. So it really depends. And on the topic of just racial slurs, I would say that certain words that are racist or that were racist in origin have been obviously they're bad because they're racist and it's meant to be derogative. But not only that, but they've been stigmatized by these politically correct people. And what they've done is, instead of saying that word, what they've done is they've come up with other ways of getting away with saying it without actually saying it.
All
And
right.
in that process, they actually become even more racist because
Right. Right.
obviously obviously what Veckel was saying, that they're trying to say something that is stigmatized, and then they're like, oh, they whisper it, they stammer, they stutter. I mean, yeah, stutter. Oh wow, the irony is strong in that. But anyways, yeah, they stutter. And obviously they're scared to say it, and that really gives that word more impact than it should. You shouldn't be scared to say it if it's not derogative.
Right. And like I said, I mean, people can make things socially unacceptable all you want. I mean, if people want to make socially unacceptable the term Johnny Boy, for example, that whoever's named John should never be called Johnny Boy. That's totally socially unacceptable. Now, if people want to create a culture like this in their own community, that's fine. That's up to them. That's their right. They can do that. The problem becomes when they use the law. That's when the problems start. When it becomes a legal issue. Then we get into trouble.
Now, Johnny, real quick. So, do you feel that if can you go ahead and broadcast Pillbox?
Sure.
So, I mean, but this is a tricky. I mean, this is really tricky. I mean, when we think about, I mean, freedom of speech is such a, and it's like such a paradox because on one hand, you want people to be able to say what they want to say, but then you think about, for example, I keep going back to the reason why I go back to the racial issues because I'm just thinking about that now. Well, for example, I'd like to ask Abraham, how do you feel about, for example, groups like the KKK who are, a history of violence and doing things like that, using freedom of speech, quote unquote, to harass minorities, in particular black people, because I mean, I just can't see that being very productive in any way. I don't know. There's just nothing good can come out of that, at least from
Well,
that particular group. So, I mean,
I
would you
was
be,
born
for
to
ex
bottom.
no, no, but I mean, I was just asking him because, since we both live in this country, I know you don't live in this country, Johnny, but
Yeah, no,
um,
I would like to just say something before that, and
so
then
so
you
for,
can.
right, right. So Abraham, for example, if you were, I don't know, let's say you're in downtown in your city, and you happen to see some KKK guys out there saying some really nasty things about black people. Um, I mean,
Well,
would you
I'm
be one of those guys that would be against that, or would you look at that like, no, that's really, I mean, how would you look at that kind of situation, and how do you feel about freedom of speech in that kind of context?
right. Well, obviously, I personally would be against them saying that, but this again crosses into legal territory where certain things that they're saying could be classified as hate speech. And in fact, I think I'm pretty sure KKK is registered as a hate group. So they do have certain rights, but obviously I'm pretty sure that they're barred from making public demonstrations. So they can still do what they do, say what they will, but as long as it doesn't cross again into hate speech and harassment, and obviously harassment is another issue because if you're harassing someone specifically, then that could have some negative consequences for that person. So it goes from you just saying things and it crosses into you actually hurting that person. So that is where I would draw the line. And really some people might say that it depends on the degree of harassment too, because obviously you could say what you want, but then let's say you have a public demonstration, and this guy is just walking along in the street, and suddenly this group starts yelling things out at him, cussing at him, and one could even say that there's a possibility for violence there, which is obviously the legal grounds which the government would have for stepping in and saying, no, no, this is hate speech. You could start a riot. You could, this person could get, beat up by this group of KKK. What they're saying gives us reason to think that there might be some violence.
Well, yeah, that's also that's something that good that you brought it up, because that's also kind of a very, very dangerous thing, because what could happen in that case is that then you could use the same, and this is actually what they tried to use for the Muslims. Well, if you say too much to a Muslim that Muhammad is a pedophile, it could cause the Muslim to become violent, and there could be a riot. So then the government could use that, for example, and this is exactly what they do in the United Kingdom before anything else. And that's why I think that this is also something that needs to be known, unless there is an active statement or there's an active showing of, like, say the person is moving now. Say that there's the KKK member. I'd say this. I first rule, let's say, what should not be legally tackled with. Let's say there's a KKK group and they shout, hey, you N, you this, you that, you C, you no good for nothing black person. They just say these things. And they say it within the range of the sound, because you can say your decibel amount shouldn't be more than that, because it can physically harm the ear channel and what have you. You
Right.
could argue that. But if it's all within that range and it's just these words being said, then no legal repercussions must be taken. Now, if the KKK starts to move in the direction of the black person, where then the government could say, oh, well, now he's getting ready for using violence. At that moment, I would say, and
Right,
only at that
exactly.
moment. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and oftentimes in these these situations, you have to take into account who's the victim here and who's saying what. And so the example that you gave, obviously someone saying something against, Allah or the Prophet. In that case, obviously if you go to these Middle Eastern countries and you say something to that effect, it's very possible that an entire crowd could try to kill you. So
Right.
then, hmm? I'm sorry, what
Yes,
was that?
that's possible, because Muslims, they don't want to control themselves in that scenario. They want to make themselves get mad. See, but this is the thing where we put the
Right,
responsibility on the one who can control themselves. This is how we do it in the West. This is how it's supposed to be, that the one then who does not control himself is the one who should be held legally responsible, not the
right,
other way around.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, and that's the exact intent of these these laws. The intent of these laws are to protect this person who might be attacked, obviously. and
Right.
it's not the other way around. You're not going to try to, put it on the victim blaming, because that's just horrible.
Right. For example, even I would say, for example, let's say that somebody comes up in public to a Jewish person and he maintains at the distance that is legally required, and he uses the K word for the Jew, which upsets the Jews a lot. Now, if the Jewish person gets so angry that he punches him, in that moment, the Jewish person should be held legally responsible. No
Right,
matter
yeah,
whether
that's
we feel sorry for him, we may feel sorry for him, we may say, oh, well, he aggravated him, but he should have controlled himself. So he was
right,
still,
exactly, yeah. And that's it. That's also the exact thing that does happen in the United States is, for example, what's the name of that church? The Westboro Baptist Church.
yes.
Obviously, what they say is highly controversial. Sometimes, they'll be protesting, a funeral or whatever, and there's the possibility that the the opposing party, so let's say the families of the the dead soldier or whatever, try to attack Westboro Baptist church. Obviously, if they do attack them, then it doesn't matter what the church was saying.
Right.
The church didn't attack them. It would actually be the family that's held responsible, legally responsible, because they're the ones who took the extra step and escalated into violence.
Right. Exactly. That's how it should be. That's exactly how I see it. That's the proper way to handle it. And any deviation from that is very dangerous. And that's what I see even in the United States. I hope it doesn't come to that. But even the smallest deviation from that, I would say, is very, very dangerous.
Right, and luckily in the United States, we haven't had too much, deviation in that area. For the most part, we've done, a good job of protecting both parties, because obviously, if you're going to have a law that says, all right, everyone has the the right to free speech, then obviously you can't give one group more rights than the other. It has to be equal for everyone. So it's in the government's best interest to make sure that all the parties are held equally in regard.
Yep. So does anyone want to add anything? Michael?
I don't really have much to add to that. Yeah, I think everybody pretty much said what I wouldn't have thought to say. So, yeah.
Scott?
I will say this though. I think since we are talking about freedom of speech, Benny here should actually take advantage of it.
Okay, I got what you said. Anyway, Scott, are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, would you like to add anything?
Not really, no.
Okay. Sabella?
Yeah, it's never okay to be a racist. I'm just saying that.
Well,
And it's not okay to use racial slurs either.
No, but what about legally?
I know it's a very tricky issue. That's
Yeah.
the problem.
I know, but it shouldn't be really that tricky. You know, this could be very easily managed if people got their emotions under control when it comes to legality. So it really shouldn't be very tricky, because if you want to if this is to be tricky, it could always end up in a disaster. So here we all need to take, especially if we are American. See, I'm not even American, but I hold the First Amendment in such a high regard that I would even be for enforcing this on every European country in the West. It is a disaster that people even in the United Kingdom, they love the United States so much, they want to do everything that the United States does, they want to copy, but they don't want to copy the First Amendment. Now, how hypocritical is that? Everything they want to take. Oh, the United States has this new fashion, or that new thing, or this comes from America. Oh, really? Oh yeah, we want to do that, but no, we don't want to have the First Amendment. No, we can't go that far. MG Pillbox, what do you say?
I think sometimes the best way to go would be to fight fire with fire. If I saw a group of coneheads walking down the street chanting something, stupid about a race, I would go and start telling them how I feel. And maybe grab a bullhorn or go to the store and buy one for $150 and then go and scream in their face for a little while and see who gives up first. I really don't have a solution otherwise other than to fight fire with fire. If someone wants to spread filth like that, I'm going to spread the word of God, or I'm going to tell them why they're wrong, or whatever evidence, whatever I can use from my tool bag, to basically douse the situation. But when you have a group like that, they're almost in a way insinuating violence. So in a way, they're kind of crossing the line as it is. When you got a group of people saying black people are less human and we should get rid of them, that's practically violence. You're basically insinuating we have to destroy these people. So right there, you're crossing the line as it is, and that should be actually illegal. Just like it's not legal for me to threaten people in office. If I say something about somebody in office, I can go to jail. Freedom of speech doesn't really work the way people think it does. I can go to jail for saying something about a congressman or the president. So I think people that are saying negative, destructive things about other people should be held in the same manner. Yeah, you can have freedom of speech. Oh, you could say all day that, okay, you don't think black people are this and that, but the moment you start saying that black people should be removed from an area where they live or something, like, you're inciting violence, you're inciting destruction. So that's crossing the line.
We covered that. Yeah, that's physical when you call for physical harm or for
Right, yeah, and that would cross into the realm of hate speech and what you said earlier, death threats. So that is actually legally barred, obviously. So freedom of speech does actually have its limits, and these limits make sense because obviously if you have someone yelling that someone should be killed because they're less human or something, then that is obviously you're trying to incite that violence against that group or person. So that is where the line is drawn. But however, what you said earlier about the bullhorn, I'm pretty sure most states have a limit on how many decibels you can reach if you are protesting or just out in public. So I wouldn't exactly be sure about that. But obviously using your own voice, you would never be able to get loud enough for those restrictions to come in place. So you would actually be you would have that right to yell back at those people. And obviously, and I also think there's also a limit on how close you can get to someone when you are exhibiting either some kind of a public protest or just this demonstration. So there is also that. You have to respect other people's personal space, because obviously if you're just getting right up to someone yelling in their face, that could be cause for harm, violence.
Yeah, there's a distance limit. Yeah, I agree with that.
They're coming to my ground. I'm not going to their backyard. All these KKK retards usually go to neighborhoods that are not theirs, or they go to black neighborhoods, or they go to Jewish neighborhoods, or things like that. They're not even doing it in their own backyard. They're coming over to places they shouldn't even be. And when they do that, they're already crossing a line as it is. When we're talking about like decibels and stuff, well, a crowd of these jackasses is going to be pretty loud. So I'm not going to be doing anything they're not doing. If you have a hard time hearing me over a crowd, neither one of either you're going to make both of us go away, or we're allowed to both be there. You can't have it either way. You can't just pick and choose who has the right to protest, especially if they're coming to the backyards of people they hate.
Well, I wanted to ask, I don't know if this has been addressed already, but what about in cases of, when we're talking about things like defamation, for instance, the livelihood of another individual, would that be illegal for somebody to say something?
Yeah, I'll say
It depends on, obviously, if someone does try to, accuse you of libel, the courts do take into account what harm was done, the capacity for harm, and all sorts of things. So libel on it in itself isn't sufficient for legal action. However, if you are committing libel, it is the right of the other party to say, hey, you're doing this, this isn't legal. They can take you to court. However, if it doesn't hold up in court, then obviously they're not going to win anything. So
Right.
libel in itself isn't, well, obviously it's illegal, but libel in itself isn't always harmful.
Yeah, and I would like to add that we covered a bit of this already, Becca, but since you weren't here, I'd mention this again. I would totally agree. I mean, if you accuse somebody of for example, somebody has a business and you say that this person is a murderer, you spread that around. Now, murdering is illegal, okay, in the United States even. So obviously then you can make a case. Then he could, if he gets sued, yeah, then he could have a case against him. But let's say that somebody owns a business and he's married, and I make up, because I am a scumbag, let's say, and I make up the story that he goes to prostitutes. This guy visits prostitutes, and because of that, now his wife gets so upset, and his business then crumbles because of that. Now I would not agree with a legal lawsuit, because then again we get into problems, because prostitution is not illegal. So there we can't really make a case, you see. So now it may be I did a scumbagish thing, it upset the person, it caused an uproar. But you see here, if we get legality involved in there, then we get the same thing. The next thing will happen then is that the Muslims will say, well, he said something against Muhammad that made me so upset that now I couldn't run my business, and therefore my customers, I couldn't sleep the night, and that's why my business didn't run efficiently, and this is why, all these people I had to, I can't pay them anymore and stuff like that. They could, and it's a very, very dangerous slippery slope if we go that route. So we have to be very strict in that regard. The only exception is if you accuse somebody of something illegal, but that's an illegal action.
Right. Obviously, in court, if someone does try to claim, emotional damage or what have you, the court will actually get a psychologist or a therapist to evaluate the person to see if there actually was harm done. So obviously you can have this host of people just making all these claims, and it is actually up to the court to decide whether or not they have any ground.
Yeah, in order for someone to win a case where you're accusing someone else of committing libel against you, you have to prove that they knew that what they were saying was false and that they had intent to cause harm.
Right, yeah. And not only that, but if there was harm done, then obviously that goes in favor of the person saying, oh, this other party committed libel against me. So that would only add to the sentence.
So say that I was a person who ran a well-known restaurant reviewing business, and I reviewed restaurants, and then I published something saying that the owner of a certain restaurant was racist, and then everyone stopped going to their restaurant because of that. I don't think that should be legal to do.
Right, because it's legal to be racist.
I'm
not
sorry,
sure
what was
if you
that?
agreed with me
I
or
didn't
not.
get that.
Isn't it legal to be racist?
Right. But so if I am someone
Right,
who runs a
right.
newspaper
It doesn't work.
and I publish something saying that the owner of a business is racist, and then because of my published statement people stop going to their business, I don't think that it should be legal for me to do that.
Right, you defame them. Yes.
Exactly. Johnny disagrees with that.
I disagree with that, because being racist isn't illegal. So we have a problem.
Well, I don't think it's
Right,
about what
when-
you accuse them of, it's about the damage they create.
Is being racist wrong, though, Johnny?
It's morally wrong for sure. It's just like cussing Christ, Jesus, is incredibly wrong.
So you can defame people without breaking the law,
Right? Exactly.
right? Which is not right, which we know is not right.
It's not
Yeah,
moral.
that's why it's illegal.
It shouldn't have any legal repercussions. Just like when somebody mocks Jesus Christ, I don't argue for any legal repercussion for that. unless I were to be consistent and argue, well, the most severe penalty should then be, if I were to be consistent with my faith, to say if anybody mocks or defames Jesus in any way, he should have the harshest punishment ever. Yeah, then I can talk about all of these racist claims also being made.
Now, wait a minute.
But
Is
before
it-
I do that,
To lie, Johnny. Is it legal to lie about somebody?
I think I'm not aware of what it's. I think it is legal in as far as if you don't accuse the person of something illegal. For example, if I say that person is a woman and he's actually a man, and I know that, it's a lie, but there shouldn't be any legal repercussions for that.
But the court can still sue you for defamation even though no laws are broken. You were still defaming that person. If they can prove they had trauma or distress because of it, you are guilty of committing a crime by hurting that person. Right.
Well, then we have a
actual
problem.
harm-
This is the thing. That's already something very
actual
dangerous,
harm
and I'll
that
explain
was
why.
done is what's
That is-
taken into account. The
Is
harm
that-
that was done is what's taken into account.
The one?
The harm that was done is what's taken into account, which changes the entire game. Because obviously, if you have someone, slandering the name of Christ or Allah or what have you, or Buddha,
Yeah.
obviously that in itself doesn't do any harm. But
It
it's
may, though.
when
It may do harm because when the Muslim owns a business, in that case, it may cause harm.
right,
and it may be
exactly, yeah,
more
that's where it changes from you just saying something offensive into translating into harm. And
Mhm.
this is where the difference is, where the line is actually drawn, is in the harm. Because I mean, you can say obviously, oh, this restaurant, they're really bad, they hate Jews, they're just horrible people. And then upon reviewing, obviously the restaurant, they lose customers, they lose business, they have to close down because of all the business they lost. That's harm done. They have the legal right to say, all right, no, this person was lying. That wasn't obviously true, and this caused my business to actually be closed down. And the situation where the restaurant wouldn't win is if they had in fact said something to the effect of Jews being horrible or whatever they said. Then it wouldn't be liable because the person accusing them of that wouldn't have been lying. And there's actually I mentioned earlier the case of the pizza place. They had actually made some homophobic remarks, and they were trying to sue the people who accused them of being homophobic. But I don't even think that the case was taken to court because
They
obviously
shouldn't have
they
even
did say
said
those
that
things.
because they just randomly said that on the news.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So then at that point, the person wasn't lying about them. The person, it wasn't liable, obviously, because he was telling the truth. But if that person had been lying and the restaurant had not, in fact, said anything to that effect, then it would have been liable. And they did lose business. However, the case obviously didn't go over to court because it wasn't valid.
Right. So when somebody, let's say, okay, let's analyze this. So when I, for
Johnny, let me
example,
help you out. Johnny, there's one key word we're missing here. It's called harassment. Let's say Alex Botten lived in America, so Veckel and I decided to, pull an awesome prank and record it. We're going to go over to his house and basically praise the Lord Jesus Christ. And he leaves his house and comes out of his house, and here's me and Veckel holding signs saying, "Hey, isn't this a wonderful day in Jesus' world, Mr. Botten?" He could sue us just for harassment. We have not broken any laws. We have not even threatened him. We have not defamed him. And all we're saying is we love the Lord Jesus Christ. We can still be sued. And we haven't broken a single law. In America, it could just be called harassment, and you're done. If they find a good prosecutor that can prosecute me and Veckel because we were harassing him, we're in big trouble.
yeah, if you called him, what did you say? Did you ring him on his?
It doesn't matter what I do. If he says it's harassment, he doesn't even have to have any evidence. He can just get a lawyer and sue us. You don't even have to have a shred of evidence. He can literally actually do it without us even being there. But if I'm there and someone hates somebody like me and Veckel, we're hated obviously by atheists, they can literally just say we harass them, and that's it. They don't have to say a single syllable after that. Any lawyer that wants to take the case can take the case and sue us and maybe even make us have jail time. Who knows how far it's going to go? But all you
they
need
could
is
do that
harassment.
they could also accuse you of harassment and have proof of it if you sent them text messages or made phone calls to them or left them
phone calls,
letters or
okay.
emails.
That's
Right,
a
and
big
that's
story.
with proof. You
Exactly.
can do it without proof. You don't even have to have evidence. That's how the court system works. You don't even have to have the shred of evidence.
Pill. And I actually
Seriously.
want to add to what Pill was saying.
Hmm.
There's actually been cases where there was no evidence. It wasn't pertaining to that issue where there were these obviously these people praying. I can't remember what it was, but obviously someone accused this person of harassment, and this person went to jail and they were fined. And it wasn't until a few years later that the court revised the case, and they said, all right, no, there's absolutely no evidence. He shouldn't have paid the fines. He was wrongly accused. But Pillbox is right. If someone it's rare, but it does happen sometimes. It's possible that it even happens more because obviously the only reason I knew about that was because the news reported on it. It was a big story. So it's possible that this happens on even some would say it's possible that it even happens on a regular basis. However,
well, let's define harassment.
oftentimes-
I want to break this down. Though. What is first of all, what is included under the definition of harassment? Let me give you an example. If I go up in public, and I keep the legal distance, and I keep the legal decibel, and I say to somebody what is very, very insulting, I think that would that in any way, shape, or form could that be classified as harassment?
No, of course not. But of course, it also depends on what you said to them. If you were obviously referring to them specifically,
Yes.
then the case could be made that it was harassment. But
Like what?
however, if you're like for example, if you say, hey you retard, you little just all these
Right.
cuss words saying that you're gonna do these things or that they're this and that, obviously that would not be acceptable.
That would not be
However,
acceptable. Okay, wait.
right.
So you're saying in the United States, there's even keeping within the legal.
Well, I mean,
def-
socially acceptable. I didn't mean on a legal standpoint.
Yeah, but that's
However, right. I was trying to make a point. Sorry, but so obviously the case could be made that was harassment. However, if you were standing in the street, keeping your distance, following all the rules, and you said something insulting a belief that this person holds, that would actually not, you couldn't make the case that that's harassment because obviously you're not harassing them, you're insulting something held outside of them.
or their views, or even I'm insulting even their person for their actions because I just think that this guy has a bad character, and I don't like him.
The thing that you guys
Right.
are
Well, Johnny,
leaving out is that
You're out of school because it offends parents or it offends this person or it offends atheists. I mean, they can do anything they want. If they say it offends them, it doesn't matter. I can say that babies with candy is offensive to me if I work in a building, and I bet I could get some psychopathic lawyer to agree with me and go to court and sue people that had babies with candy so they can't bring.
That wouldn't hold up in court, though.
It does. It just about these types of psychopathic things do hold up in court. Just look at what we've gone through in the past 10 years.
Rarely. They rarely do, but
It's still happening. It still happens.
right,
you
yeah,
can sue
but
someone for
obviously,
anything. It doesn't mean you're going to win.
Well,
Yeah,
if that
exactly.
happens though, if that's even possible,
Hold on, he just made a good point. He said exactly true. You can sue somebody for anything, but you might not win. But just the lawsuit itself is very destructive. Just the lawsuit is extremely.
yeah, and I would actually agree with that because obviously if you have to go to court, even if you didn't do anything, that obviously you're legally required to go to court and pay the legal fees for defending yourself in court. So even though legally there was no harm done, the act of just going to court itself does require a lot of money and time investment
Right.
just defending yourself. So obviously it wouldn't in a lot of these cases, these hypotheticals that you're mentioning, yeah, this person can sue, but it wouldn't necessarily hold up in court. But you did bring up a very good point. It's still harmful just because of the fact that the person is going to court.
Right, and people abuse these powers. Very selfish people abuse the powers of the courts. I could ruin anybody and not even win. I could
Right,
ruin
but if
anybody, especially the bigger or the more money you have, or if you're some guy on YouTube that does this and that. I can take you to court because you are saying offensive things, and like I'm not even in the same state. My point is that the system is very. It's deplorable is the word I can use, because it's not right that I have that much power to use a court system to literally destroy somebody for a short period of time. They will never recover in most senses, even if I had not a shred of evidence.
Right, exactly, and this is actually a problem with big companies. Obviously, sometimes there have been cases where these big companies are doing something harmful. Either but it's in indirect ways where it's harmful, but it's not from the restrictions that they have on them on their products. And so obviously you have this customer that comes up, tries to sue them. The company might lose, but they have so much money and power that the person trying to fight them is going to lose a hell of a lot of money trying to fight them. Even though the company might lose, the person effectively has lost because of all the money that they put into it, and for what? Just to win, a tiny sum from the court.
If somebody, okay, let me ask this: if somebody, like you said, they sue them for harassment stuff, and it gets into court, and of course I have to pay those legal expenses and stuff, but then I win the case, won't then the person have to pay me back all those
Right,
legal
you're able to
expenses?
countersue for defamation in that case.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with harassment, if you're going to sue somebody for harassment and succeed in that, even if you just want a restraining order, you have to have a specific amount of calls or threats or text messages or emails from that person to prove harassment.
And you have to prove that you actually suffered damages based on their actions.
Yeah, that too.
And that's what
So
I
yeah, there
do with
is
restraining orders.
you can sue for anything, but there are lots of requirements for that case to actually go through and win.
Actually, all you need is money. Believe it or not, all you need is money and a lawyer that's just as sick as you to sue some innocent person for whatever you want, and you'd be surprised you could even win with no evidence, because a judge can see that you have a lawyer and you have money, and if the other person can't afford a lawyer, 9 times out of 10 they just automatically give you summary judgment to the person who has a lawyer. So if you can sue anybody here can sue a poor person right now and win 9 out of 10 times without a shred of evidence.
Yeah, but
it doesn't work if you're on a level playing
poor person
field.
won't get anything, because a poor person doesn't even have anything. So what's the use of suing? If anybody, I would sue another millionaire would sue another
Do
millionaire.
you want me to give you an example, Johnny?
Yeah, give me an example.
I've seen this personally happen. There was a case where some bankers and within the family basically conned one of their own family members into doing a loan scam. Well, these con artists didn't do the scam right, and it turned out that the house did not change ownership. So they had to sue the poor person that they stole everything from, because the scam didn't work, and they won in a court. And it didn't even go, and the reason I know this, I saw this, it didn't even go to court. They gave summary judgment for the rich people who stole all the money to then transfer ownership over the poor person's property that they had already lost. Even though it was all illegal, the court still helped these banksters screw these poor people over that were already screwed over. The court literally helped them, gave them summary judgment, and didn't even give the poor person a word in court. It's much worse than you guys think it is, trust me.
Well, that's an issue with the letter of the law, not with the actual process of suing someone. Because if you start limiting who's able to file to sue someone, then it opens a huge can of worms. And whether or not you have evidence when you're starting the suing process is irrelevant, because the evidence isn't presented until you get to court.
Right, but Scott, the court system is designed to protect criminals and people with money. That's all it does. It automatically helps people that are finding clauses or finding excuses, or if they have a reason, or they can make up whatever reason. They can literally say, well, this person just made a verbal agreement with me. They don't even have to have a contract. My point is that if you have money, you can abuse anybody in the court system no matter what, even to hide your own scam.
Well, then
It depends on what they're suing for, though. If they're suing to get a restraining order because they're being harassed, that's a whole different story than for a summary judgment.
Well, then the solution to that, I would say, would be to make verbal contracts of no effect. Simple as that.
Right, but think of it this way: is that they didn't even care. They didn't even care there was no contract. They admitted there was no contract, and it didn't matter. They had a lawyer. They had money. This poor person didn't have anything except they did write to the judge and tell him, "Hey, this is a bunch of BS, and you people have stolen everything from me." And they still lost. And actually, what's interesting is that the judge actually helped these criminals and lied for them and said that the poor person who was being sued agreed with the bankers, and the guy was, of course, completely up in arms. It's completely crazy, guys. I'm just telling you, it is worse than you think.
But that's fine. But did that not another judge? Is there not another that they take it to the Supreme Court, and then that judge will be held accountable? Because you can take it higher up the ladder, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
you can take it high up as long as you have enough money to pay for it.
Yeah,
But these issues don't stem from the fact that anyone can file to sue for any reason. And something else that I think should be brought up is that
I mean, it's also possible that a lawyer, isn't there always lawyers around that see an opportunity here to, because if they are lawyers also who, on the one, they fight for what is right, but at the same time they also see that they have an opportunity to sue some big mafia guys out of their millions of dollars. So that person could try to get hold of such a person and then use him to defend him. There should also be that possibility then, shouldn't there?
you lost me somewhere.
I said that given the situation where the person lost, this poor guy now lost, and he's been scammed by and even the judge was involved, let's say, in this regard. And now that poor person doesn't have any money, but he goes out and he looks in the internet and he finds an extremely good lawyer who specializes in these cases, and that lawyer then takes his side because obviously he knows that he can go up to a higher appeal to a higher judge, will then win the case and sue these millionaires out of them, these fraudsters out of their millions.
Right, but the first thing the lawyer is going to ask you is, how much can you pay me?
No, but he knows that even if he cannot initially pay me, he's going to get multi-millions in the
There
process.
are very few lawyers who will do that.
Exactly. That's the problem, Johnny, is that the lawyers don't care. Lawyers are not, I'm sorry, Johnny, if you took all the lawyers on earth and you put them on the equator, we'd all be better off. Right, that's all they care about. You can't pay the lawyer. They don't care. They don't care what happens to you. They're lawyers.
Right, but they care for the money. I'm not. You didn't understand the point. They care for the money, though. If they see that they have a chance of winning the case and making millions of dollars in the process, obviously they'll care. Even if you can't initially pay them, they'll say, fine, we'll sue that person. I'm 90% sure that I'm going to win, so I'm going to get these $10 million anyways. And then, of course, he's going to do it. He's not going to be stupid then in that case and not do it.
But there's no such thing, Johnny. There's no such thing as a sure case. That's why they have all these stipulations that actually protect criminals. There's no. I could literally be beat to death by police. How many times do you see police literally kill people and don't even go to court over it when they kill unarmed children? I mean, as of late, how many cases have you seen where cops have killed unarmed black children just in the last 2 years, and almost zero have been prosecuted?
Okay, what's the reason for that?
That's an issue with the district attorneys because they're not willing to prosecute cops because they work so closely with them.
Right, but they're all in on it. The whole system is a joke. The whole thing is a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I mean, then there's got to be, aren't there any people then from another location that would have a benefit out of helping those people? Because I understand it's all about benefit, but then other people would have benefit of...
Well, yeah, Johnny, that's why we have the Second Amendment. We're supposed to form militias and go after these people and literally rip them out of their seats and probably draw and quarter them. That's what the Second Amendment is about, is protecting ourselves against tyranny. But you just got to find, a couple thousand soldiers to go with you.
Right. Well, that would be the final, the last of all.
Right. Well, we're getting pushed more and more, Johnny. I mean, in the next 10 years, we're probably going to start seeing it.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand if nothing else works. Well, then of course you're left with no other option. But you see, all methods would have to be exhausted before it comes to that, and the system should always be that way. That there should always be enough options available, even for the poorest of the poor. to get justice.
I wish it was that way, but the system is designed to destroy the poor. That's why we have all over the United States, Johnny. I don't know if you know this. We have photo radar systems all over the highways and streets of the United States, and they are designed to take your picture. If you're driving like a police officer or a judge, they can send you fines, they can send you tickets, and you can literally lose your license and you can lose your life just by HOV or photo radar tickets because you don't even have the money to pay for the ticket. So if you're poor and driving and you get a ticket, well, there goes your car, there goes your license, there goes all your ability. And that's just one section of it. It's all designed to take everything from poor. The poor are the lower class are being destroyed in this country. It's a systematic deletion.
No, but
Actually, in some states, it's actually worse than that because you can pay the ticket, you can pay the fine, and they will add a point to your license, and then you have to pay that too.
Exactly. Yes.
okay, but then the person actually has to overspeed, right? I mean, he has to go over the speed limit, right? In order for that.
No. He could be going with traffic, or it could be some other circumstances. You will not be pulled over. A computer system, a photo radar system takes your picture and says you did this, and you weren't even cited or pulled over by any authority. They can just say, "Yep, you were there. You did this wrong," and they can take all your rights away.
They
Yeah,
can't
but
keep
like
you
for
in all
example,
kinds of
crossing of,
stuff.
I mean, they
It
have
doesn't
that.
have to be
I
free.
know that. I mean, they have this all the time. The point system, like when you drive over a red traffic light, you cross the red traffic. Obviously, the camera's going to catch you. I had that once. I mean, I was going in another city, and that time I just had that. There's actually a thing. If you do it over 3 seconds, then you get 5 points, and your driver's license gets taken for 3 months. I was lucky. I was within 1 second. I crossed the red traffic. I had to pay 90 euros, and I got 3 points. But those have been extinguished again. I think that was about 3 years ago.
Right. Well, think of it this way, Johnny, though. It's okay for the cops and the judges and rich people to do that. See, if you're rich and you do that, you just pay the fine. If you're a judge, they don't even cite the judges. They don't even cite police when they break these laws. They only cite you if they can get you, and that's why the system is so corrupt, because they only go after the ones they can get, and they continue to protect the actual criminals that are the ones breaking laws all the time, like judges and police. So, it's just a bad system that's designed to delete poor people.
Well, I don't know whether in this example, because look, if the judges did that, let's say the judges oversped, at least here in Germany, I saw that if somebody who is in a higher position, if they do something like this, first of all, they'll get the points that everybody else does, and they also pay the same amount of fine that everybody else does. That's the first thing. There we could argue, okay, should we have a percentage of the monthly income as a fine or just a general amount? That could be discussed, but be that as it may. So, but in addition to that, that person may actually lose his job or his position. Like, let's say if a judge did that, they may say, no, you're no longer, if you do this, then I think for a couple of months you're not going to be accepted as a judge anymore. So they are actually strict with such people who are in higher positions, more so than they are with people who have a lower income job. They'll just lose their driver's license for 3 months, but not their job.
Right. Outside of America, that might be how it works, but in America, it's a giant scam. So.
Well, I have to look more into that. I'm not too aware about how the United States is supposed to be. I mean, the top leading nation when it comes to justice. I did not imagine that the United States was actually less just than many of the countries in Europe, because the freedom of speech law certainly in Europe isn't that much. Freedom of speech isn't available as much in any European country as it is in the United States. I mean, that I can definitely say.
And Johnny, if you actually get pulled over by an actual cop and you happen to know them, or you happen to be connected to somebody who knows them, they will let you go. But if you don't, they end up screwing you over.
Yeah, but does that not depend on the amount of crime or that I was engaged in? Like, let's say if I went 10 miles per hour over the limit, so they let me go. But let's say I went like 100 miles over the limit, and then I also crashed into somebody else's car and stuff like that.
At that point, they wouldn't have a choice. But
yeah,
there are a lot of other things you could do that they could find out when you get pulled over, and if you know them, they'll just let you go.
Well, yeah, I guess that can
happen. You can be driving a car with fraudulent tags, and they will let you go if you know them.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
happened.
Extreme. Okay.
In my family, it's happened.
Interesting. Well, yeah, well, I can imagine. I mean, that yes, that I mean, it's not completely. I would still not call that the biggest thing, though. But there could be like if what MG Pillbox said, if there's this big thing where you actually have these scam artists and the judge being in all together, and then the poor person loses even his own property that he was scammed for in the beginning. Well, then we have, of course, a huge problem. I hope that's just an isolated incident, though.
The judges are extremely corrupt here. I mean, that's what they're doing with the mortgage stuff too. They're taking people's houses even though they don't have any right to, because they don't have the proper evidence to prove that these people own the house that are suing for foreclosure on these houses, and they're doing that too. Even if the person can prove that they paid all their debts for the house and did everything, they can still take your house.
Yeah. Oh, that's bad. Well. Hey, McKay Edge.
Hey Johnny, how you doing?
I'm doing okay, thank you. Oh, did we meet before?
I think very briefly.
Very briefly. Are you a Christian?
Yeah, I'm a Christian Universalist.
Oh, okay.
Sorry to interrupt, but I gotta get going. So you guys have a good evening. Thanks for the invite, Johnny, and see your faithful McKay, Sabella, Scott, Beckel, and everyone
See you,
else.
bro.
You too, thank you.
Have a good one.
So, yeah, McKay, did you have to say anything about what was said so far?
I'm pretty ignorant on what was said so far, so I couldn't really touch on that.
Well, basically, we were talking about the freedom of speech. In Europe, it's a disaster. As far as I can tell, I'm in Germany. I mean, here we have a lot of restrictions. Not as much yet as in the United Kingdom, though, which is pretty ironic. I always thought that the United Kingdom and the United States, they were kind of like big-time butt buddies, even especially when it comes to the First and Second Amendments. But the opposite is the case. The Second Amendment, of course, they are very strict in the United Kingdom. I mean, even stricter than in Germany. There's almost no way you can get a handgun. It's completely illegal for any ordinary citizen to, even by license, it's not allowed. It's completely not allowed. Then, of course, we have the First Amendment problems of the problem. They say it's freedom of speech, but then you say something in the street, it immediately becomes hate. For example, you put somebody's religious figure down, hate speech. You say it's the slightest against Muhammad, even if it's the truth, hate speech, especially because it's against a minority, the poor little Muslim. I'm an ex-Muslim myself, by the way. So this is the thing. It's a complete disaster when it comes to the United Kingdom. And then we compare this to what is in the United States, and then other things were brought up that even in the United States, although there is this thing about freedom of speech, there's a lot of the justice system is what we were last talking about, how the people who have money, they manage to screw over poor people, even in the justice system, that the judge, for example, would be in on the scam. The judge, imagine this, would be in on the scam, and he would be, taking that, what was the poor person's property, taking it all away from him. And in this way, there'd be a huge corruption throughout the process. And I also heard that supposedly isn't an isolated incident. I just hope that this is an isolated incident, because, I mean, if it has come to that far, that this is all over the place, it would be like a disaster.
Right. I think it is all over the place. I think it's just systematic, though. I don't think it's actual, like, corruption, like people are giving money to so-and-so and so-and-so, but the judges know the prosecutors and the lawyers and whatnot. So if you have the money to hire a good lawyer who knows the judge, then you're going to get a curve on your case. So it's just systematic, and we need to fix it that way. But yeah, I would agree with you on the freedom of speech thing. I think our freedom of speech laws are a lot better.
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, there's Abraham did mention that they're slowly trying to move in that direction, as England does too, because what they try to do is always this. It starts off, they have the concept of hate speech. That is, of course, only to be used when somebody directly wants to physically harm somebody or is planning to physically harm somebody, and they try to do this by words. For example, I say to somebody, hey, now it's time you do this, you go over there, and then you attack him from behind. Of course, I'm using my speech, but then I'm calling for physical violence. So that
Right,
kind of thing, I mean, is completely understandable. I mean, but then the thing is that this is being used also to then say, okay, but look, if you say to a Muslim, for example, that Muhammad is a pedophile, he'll be so aggravated that he will then have no choice but to become violent. They're trying to make this kind of argument and thereby close the cycle. But then what's going to happen is then eventually all freedom of speech can be taken away, because anybody can then say that, oh, he insulted my mom, now I have to become violent, I have no choice but to become violent. And that's really the danger. This is the danger of any hate speech law in Europe.
right.
And I hope that never happens in the United States. But unfortunately, I've heard cases where this is already, moving in that direction.
I think we're so afraid of slippery slopes, though. In the United States, it wouldn't happen. Like even the hate speech laws are so stringent and touch on so few minorities that I don't think it would be applicable unless you specifically incite violence, which in your scenario wouldn't, in the latter one.
Yeah. I hope so. Like, for example, we addressed the KKK earlier. For example, the KKK, when they, let's say, 100 people from the KKK, they walk in the streets and they shout. It's all, of course, within the legal decibel limit and stuff like that. That's not the issue. But they shout cuss words, they shout the N-word, they shout other words, and they, of course, they insult racial minorities. We talked about that, and some Americans were actually wanting to. I mean, it's kind of tricky, some were saying. It's kind of tricky. And you see, that's also a dangerous thing, because when you start to already say that it's kind of tricky, it shouldn't be tricky, really. It should be, this is where every American should clear-cut say, as much as I dislike this, I gotta say, I'll protect the First Amendment. You can't have this even being tricky, because then you're touching upon the First Amendment already. So this is the thing, That's kind of what we were.
Well, I think that's what's beautiful about, ironically, the Nazi flag and people's freedom to wave it and all do it all they want with it. Like they can do that as much as they want.
Yeah. So, did anybody want to add anything to this? Anybody? Beckel, Scott?
Yeah, I don't really have anything else to contribute at this time. At least not now.
All right.
Yeah, but so far as a good conversation, it's good to get these things out there and hear different opinions, different positions, stuff like that.
Right.
So,
Scott?
Do you guys think that the Bible supports freedom of speech?
I would say I see no restriction under the new covenant.
right. That's a very good answer. No restriction under the new covenant. Right. We do see examples, however, within the theocracy of the Israelites in the Old Testament, where there was the blasphemy. I think it's mentioned in Deuteronomy. I think. Where somebody was actually stoned for blaspheming God, using the Lord's name in vain.
Right.
But that's about it, though, as far as expressing an opinion or something. We don't see any precedents like that mentioned in the Old or the New Testament. Anything against speaking against authority. I mean, there is the respect of authorities. That's it. Not to say like throw a smear campaign, if you will, or continuously saying ill things about the authorities because they're appointed by God. However, that doesn't mean that we can't speak out against injustice either, because I mean, even within the body of Christ, within the church, there's precedence where we can actually speak up against the elder if an elder is saying something that is unbiblical. We, as the layman, if you will, have the authority to cross-examine and prosecute that elder. So, but as far as regular freedom of speech in outside the church, yeah, like what Johnny said, there's no restriction to that. So
Yeah. Thank you. Welcome, Hades. Did you want to say something? Hades, you there?
oh, he's
In
there.
Second Kings chapter 2, a bunch of people get killed for calling Elisha bald.
Yeah, that's different though. That was not a legal matter. That's a one time that was a one-time incident, an example, an object lesson, if you will, from God to show that you don't touch the Lord's anointed, um, which is basically, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. It wasn't something that was judicial, so
Well,
there
it
wasn't
seems to
any.
support the idea that it would be righteous for someone to be punished for making offensive statements.
What is that about? Is that about somebody mocking a prophet or something? Or what is that about?
Yeah, that's the part where the prophet Elijah was being made fun of by 40 people,
Oh yeah,
40
but where the
Israelites.
bears came, the she bears.
Yeah, and then the two she bears, right, were
Oh,
called upon
oh, that's
and
very easy. I
killed.
mean, first of all, that's the natural. That's what God Himself used the animals to
Exactly.
because obviously God doesn't like all kinds of speech. That's
Yeah,
the thing. We're talking about the judicial thing that we as humans should
exactly. That
have set
wasn't.
up because of the state of
Yeah,
man. I mean, it's a totally different. It's not that in a perfect society, there wouldn't be. I mean, people wouldn't even use the speech that insults other people. And of course, under the old covenant laws, there were certain, like I said, blasphemy against God was one of them, but there were many other restrictions. But in this case, over here, of course, God was, of course, God even Christ even said, if you think about adultery, you've already committed it. So when it comes to God, you in your heart, not even doing anything, just thinking for yourself, man, I'm gonna do this to that woman. That alone is enough for God to maybe cause a storm, stir up a storm, and knock you on the floor. So that's a different story altogether. You see, what we're talking
yeah,
about here, because human beings themselves are sinners, when they start judging people over things that they say, we would have a disaster because they are no better. That's the real issue here. You see?
yeah. When God says that vengeance belongs only to Him, yeah, I mean that's exactly what we see happening in Scripture. God condemns the act of revenge upon humans. However, He Himself is actually allowed to practice that, because when He practices revenge or vengeance, it is done in a righteous manner, in a just manner, as opposed to the way humans would do it. So in the same way, we're looking at that example with Elijah and the two she bears. uh, that was not something that God commanded. That was not an example for, from God saying, okay, now you can go, use this as an example of killing
Right.
people who make fun of the
That we start
prophets.
training
That
dogs,
was,
right?
yeah,
Now we start training dogs or wild she bears, and then set them loose upon people. That's not what that
right.
passage is calling for. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
that was just a simple one-time object lesson from God to the people, but it wasn't something that was made a law to the Israelites. So
Yeah, not even back then when they had very strict laws that we need not have under the new covenant at all. Even then, that wasn't meant for them.
yeah, and as
So
far
yeah,
as this other passage that's brought up, like Deuteronomy 4:5-8, I don't see. Uh, I would like Hades to make to expound on that since he brought it up. Uh, I can read it real quick. It says, Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 5-8 says, See, I'm reading it out of the ESV. It says, See, I have taught you statutes and rules, as the Lord my God commanded me, that you should do them in the land that you are entering to take possession of it. Keep them and do them, for that will be your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples, who, when they hear all these statutes, will say, Surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. Verse 7. For what great nation is there that has a God so near it as the Lord our God is to us whenever we call upon him? Verse 8. And what great nation is there that has statutes and rules so righteous as, let me scroll down here, as all this law that I set before you today. So I don't see how this is relevant to. I mean, could you expound on that?
Yeah, I think he just thought that was relevant to something that was said earlier. Because
okay.
yeah. So be that as it may, though. Yeah, let's see. Who did we not have a new? Oh, that was Hades. Who came in new? Okay. Oh, Daniel. Daniel, did you wanna perhaps say something about this? Okay, go right ahead.
Think he's gonna type instead of
Oh,
talk.
he just types. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm waiting. If nobody, if nobody wants to say anything, and I'll just wait for a couple of moments, then I'll just end it, and we leave it at that. So, if anybody wants to add, go ahead.
I think.
Well, I guess we could ask. Oh, sorry, Beckle, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to ask Johnny, what would you think would be the easiest solution to this?
Oh, you mean in regards to freedom of speech now, in general?
Yes.
Well, the easiest solution is to keep it, like I think you also touched upon that, keep it very stringent. The only exception for anything in regards to speech would be somebody directly calls for physical, and I mean the emphasis be on the word physical.
Right.
Physical violence, physical harm. That is the only exception. There is no other exception that should be made. Even the ruining business things, even that, I personally wouldn't go for that. I know some people would say, well, if it causes, harm in the business because of what somebody said, because they lied, even that is dangerous. Even
Do you
that
think that
people
it
should
should be
think
legal
about.
for someone to bully another person to the point that they kill themselves or something like that?
If they're just using words to do it and staying within the decibel range and staying within the mile range or the distance range, then
I would
yes.
have to
Yeah, I
disagree
would
with
agree.
that.
I agree with Johnny because we need to teach our kids how to be strong and take bullying because when you're brought up in an internet age, there's going to be no restrictions. It's anonymous, all of it's anonymous. How could we prosecute all these bullies that are driving kids literally into suicide?
Right.
It would be impossible.
People should learn how to be strong enough to perhaps form their own group and then counter that with the same words and with the same strong language. This is how it must go about. This is the only effective way how to deal with this, not by using the law in that instance. It is very important that people learn that. Bullying with words, there is no such thing like bullying with words, legally speaking. Because once we define, oh, he's being bullied with words, then we have a problem. Because then guess what? The next thing what will happen is the Muslim is going to say, well, he bullied me by calling my prophet, who's the dearest person to me, all sorts of names. And that, of course, would end up being a disaster. So we can't have that.
Right. Yeah, you just have to pick a necessary evil. And I don't think we're doing anything to prepare our children to be bullied. We're trying to focus on, stopping bullying so much, but that's not going to happen. We have to prepare kids to be bullied and to teach them how to stand back up and, push back with words, like Johnny said.
Exactly. And most of the time, though, when I hear the word bullying, normally what I picture is, for example, in a school, they'll come too close to a person and then they'll start pushing them physically. That's usually what I understand by bullying. And of course, their legal action has to be taken. Definitely. In that moment. So did anyone want to add anything to that?
I didn't mean to cut Sabella off. She did add it in the text box. I don't know if she wants to reiterate it or not.
Okay.
I guess not.
What?
Yeah,
Oh,
she
the thing
told
about
I was
being
just asking.
bullied?
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally disagree with that. Because one of my cousins, like I said earlier, did kill himself because he was being bullied by his brothers because of his race.
Yeah, but how?
So,
Physically? Was he physically being touched, or was he just being with words?
as far as I know, all they did was say words
Well, but that's the thing
day
that.
in and day out his entire childhood.
So why didn't he cuss them back? Why didn't he do anything back to them?
Because at that point, he was the second youngest in the family.
Okay, why did nobody
He
help
had
him?
4 older brothers.
Okay, why did nobody help him?
Right. Yeah. Just like Johnny's saying, I'm not trying to interrupt you, Sabella. But yeah, he needs to take pride in his race or whatever, the differences were between him and his brothers. He needs to take pride in that.
And he also, people should have helped him. That's the first and foremost thing. Why did nobody help him? Why
Because
did
his
nobody
mother
support
thought
him?
it was funny, and the rest of the family supported her. And what they were doing to him,
And how old
But
was
then
he?
how would we prosecute that?
How old was he
look,
though?
I think they all should be put in jail, but that's just me. When he finally ended up killing himself, he was 22.
No, but when they were doing this with him, how old was he? When did they start
Oh,
this?
from the time he was little, like real little.
Well, okay, then you could call don't they have the Child Protection Service?
They do, but I mean,
Yeah.
that was years ago. Who was going to report them?
Oh yeah, but then you can, if they did that when he was young, okay, then you can make a case based on that okay, they mistreated the child, so you can make a case under child mistreatment. Yeah, in that way you can then formulate the case, but not based upon when he was over 18, but what happened to him when he was under 18, under the legal age. So maybe you could do something with that, based on that.
Maybe it's something we should look into with that.
I
But I don't
think
know
that you
how
guys
that would
are
work with
underestimating.
other kids doing it.
Well, I think what Johnny's saying is it's Child Protective Services that needs to get involved there. Because the adults in his life were allowing it to happen.
Right.
I think you guys are underestimating the tangible psychological damage that being ostracized by your peers can have on a person.
Right, so that's why we protect children. That's why we have child protective services.
Not just children, but this can be extremely damaging to adults too.
Wow, but adults, look, we can't have you being a kid all your life, right? Adults need to toughen up. See, that's what's supposed to be expected at least in our societies. Because then anybody can say, like, imagine the Muslims saying, "Oh man, I'm being bullied. These people constantly put Muhammad down. Oh man, no, I have to become violent, man. What other choice did I have?" You see where this ends up, don't you? And this is the problem. Once you're
I
in,
know it's a slippery slope, but still, there has to be a way to find a medium in between to keep that kind of stuff from happening.
the only thing that you can do, Isabella, is, and that I'll agree with you, if they do it to somebody who's underage, but not if somebody is an adult.
I think you guys are putting too much weight on this slippery slope concept. And I think the most important thing is that under the laws that exists now, you have to be able to demonstrate damages in order for it to be illegal.
I don't see a problem with that. I think that's a good standard.
Yeah, the thing is, though, damages, yeah, but here we run into problems. For example, the Muslim could say, and actually there could be a Muslim who can show psychological damages due to you putting Muhammad down constantly. So should we now stop calling Muhammad a pedophile because some Muslims adult Muslims get psychologically damaged by that? See, this is a problem. Can't have that either.
And I don't even think it's a slippery slope. Like, those would be the same law if you want to put it into place that you can't bully somebody who's an adult. It's the same law that would cover the Muslim, for example. And I don't even want to use Muslims as an example, but, anybody with freedom of speech, who can feel offended easily.
And Muslims are always the first ones to jump. They watch like with an hawk's eye. All of these laws, the Muslims are always watching with a hawk's or with an eagle's eye. Because they are the first to exploit this. Because they have the mentality of wanting to put everybody other down, so they know, and they are the first ones who would be playing these laws and using them against us. This is the thing. So Muslims are extremely smart. They are, again, of all the fascists, I would say the Muslims are the smartest of all fascist groups. So, anyways, yeah, McKay, if you, I don't know if you want to add anything to that or not. Otherwise, I think nobody else has anything much left to say. So, I'll give you the last word, and then I'll end it.
No, I think it was pretty great. I think we had a good counter there at the end.
Thank you. Any final words? Okay, you can have you can end it actually. You can make an ending statement.
Okay. I think our freedom of speech laws are perfect the way they are now. I do not think we need any addendums to them.
Thank you.